The third question, is the reinforcement easier or equal? Meaning that whatever skill that we teach them, it has to access whatever they're seeking as quickly and as easily as what the behavior is already doing. Otherwise, they're not going to use it.
Welcome to the Misfit Behaviorist Podcast. Join your hosts, Audra Jensen and Caitlin Beltran, here to bring you evidence-based strategies with a student-centered focus. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Misfit Behaviorist. We are working through the FBA and BIP process, and today we want to talk about briefly step 10, which is now that we've done the FBA and we've decided what behavior we're going to be targeting, we have decided what the hypothesized function is, and we are ready to make some decisions about replacement behaviors. And Caitlin and I recently did a full podcast episode, which I will link into the show notes. And so I generated some new visuals. I want to go over quickly kind of what those are, because we're now at the stage of deciding what's most important. So Caitlin, tell us why it's a short step, but very, very important for us to keep in mind.
I think it's so important because I remember when I was first learning about replacement behaviors, and that light bulb moment for me was equating it to that whack-a-mole where it's okay, you can stomp out this behavior and you can stomp out that behavior, but unless you're giving that child something else to do, you're just going to keep whacking that mole over and over again. And if you think about it, it makes sense because it's so much easier for any one of us to focus on doing something than to focus on not doing something. That's a really hard thing to ask anyone to do.
Exactly. And one of the things we have in the visuals in this one is kind of the competing pathways flowchart that we always use. And we figured out setting events and antecedents, and we know what the problem behavior is. And that problem behavior is getting something for the student. It's fulfilling some sort of need for that learner, right? And sometimes I think we shoot too high. Well, they're doing this, but we want them to do exactly what their typical peers are doing. So we're going to make that the replacement behavior. And I always want to stop people and go, okay, they're not ready for that yet. So when we're talking about replacement behaviors, there's a couple of things I want us all to think about when we're choosing that replacement behavior to teach. Because you're exactly right. It's like they have a behavior and it's meeting a need. So it's so important that we find a more socially acceptable behavior that they can learn, that they can use, and that it will get them the same need met. And so I think that's the biggest kind of takeaway. We can't just reduce the challenging behavior. We have to actively teach what to do instead.
Right. And we got to remember that whatever the behavior the learner is showing that we are having a hard time with, they're not having a hard time with, most likely. It's working for them. So they're engaging in that behavior to meet that need. So making sure that replacement behavior is the perfect one, the perfect replacement behavior chosen for that learner with their behavior in mind is so important because it has to fulfill that same need. And then we have to produce the best, biggest response so that they want to do that replacement behavior and not the original behavior.
Exactly, which leads me right into my flow chart. I came up with this, and I think it's just helpful kind of as we're deciding on what to teach. First of all, we're not just throwing a whole bunch of things at the wall, that we're really systematic in thinking about this specific learner, what they're capable of doing, and what is going to get them the most bang for their buck and our buck as well. So the question that I ask first is, I have a behavior in mind that I'd like them to learn. Is it something they can already do? So say the behavior is yelling, calling out during circle time because they want to be removed from circle time, which is very common. If all they have is vocalizations and they're yelling, they're getting removed, and I want them to be able to say, I would like to have a break, please. Well, they can't do that yet. So unless they're able to actually perform the skill, it doesn't have to be that they're using it correctly in the moment, but it's in their repertoire. They have the ability to use the skill at some point that we can teach them.
I see this a lot with learners who use any kind of communication device as well, especially those early learners where they're learning, they're using Proloco on the iPad or whatever it may be. And so, right, we want to teach them a break. And it's oh, let's put it on the device. We're putting everything on the device. But if they're still not fluent with navigating their device for their basic wants and needs, we're going right to that card touch, that picture exchange, something that's the same result, but that is already in their repertoire.
I've told my staff that when we're thinking about a behavior we want to teach, eventually we want them to get to Harvard. I think I brought this up before. We want them to get there, but they're not ready for that yet. So let's think about where they can go right now. And that may just be the tech school or the community college. And we got to be happy with that And so you're right, is thinking about what are they capable of doing right now? And so that's the very first thing. If you think of a replacement behavior, is it something you know that they can be taught? They at least have the skill set that you can teach them to use it in a different place. And so then the second question is, does that behavior that you're thinking about meet the same function? So is it going to fill the same need?
So if the example you used was like morning meeting, they want to leave morning meeting, right? So if you're giving them like a koosh ball or something to fidget with, what they want is the break from morning meeting, right? They don't want they don't want the sensory component. They want the escape in this example. So we
Excellent.
teach something like a break request so that they get to leave morning meeting just like they leave morning meeting when they run away.
Right. Or we have students who have behaviors that are getting attention from their peers. They're hitting or yelling or something, get attention from the peers. If our goal then is to give them the I want a break as the replacement, well, you're not giving them the same need that they're seeking. The functional language that you're going to give them is, do you want to play or something so that they're getting the attention, which is what they're seeking from the peers. The third question, is the reinforcement easier or equal? Meaning that whatever skill that we teach them, it has to access whatever they're seeking as quickly and as easily as what the behavior is already doing. Otherwise, they're not going to use it. So if we teach them something, but it takes them longer to get whatever they're looking for, it has to be easier for them to do, or at least as the same. And so I think that's really important as we're thinking about what are we going to teach them, that our response to them in delivering that reinforcement, if it's asking for a break, whatever it is, has to be as quick or quicker than what they're doing with the behaviors. And that's really tricky when you're dealing with staff who don't understand the importance of that. Like a gen ed teacher who may not understand that if he asks for a break, we have to give it immediately. We can't wait and say, well, we're going to wait until recess time because then you're going to get the other behaviors back.
Right. And like the first couple examples, we were going over things the learner might not have in the repertoire. Now we're thinking about, okay, maybe the replacement behavior you're trying to teach, it's in their repertoire, but it's too many steps. It's too long. So I've had teachers say, like, oh, they can have a break. They can just go to the back of the room, write their name on the bathroom sign out, check in with me. And there's like a 3-step process as opposed to maybe just like sliding over that break card and boom, they're out of the room. Because given the problem behavior or that 3-step process, they're going to pick the problem behavior. So we need to make our new replacement behavior that quick and easy for them.
That's exactly right. And I didn't put that in here is that we need to then teach our staff that we have to stop reinforcing the other behavior. So if they're screaming out, we have to learn and teach our staff that I know it's hard not to respond to that, but now we can't respond to that. We have to only respond with this replacement behavior. And that can be really tricky for other staff to understand the importance of that. So talking about the importance of not reinforcing the old problem behavior. And then we talk about extinction bursts and spontaneous recovery and all these other things. But we need to educate our staff that why that's important to only now reinforce the replacement behavior. And then the fourth question, can the behavior you've chosen become naturally reinforcing? And we want to plan for sustainability. So whatever behavior we're teaching them to use is natural as possible. So the examples we're using is perfect, asking for a break, asking a friend for attention in some way, something that can be naturally sustainable. If we're only giving Skittles or something and that's what we're going to reinforce, well, that's not a naturally occurring reinforcement. So really think about, is the behavior we're teaching giving them access to as naturally as possible because we want them to be self-sustaining as quickly as possible too.
Exactly.
And then, so if you get through all those questions, you're like, hey, this is a great choice. Later on, we're going to be talking about collecting data, but the important part here is that we've chosen something and now we're going to implement it and see if it works. And that is going to be later on. I had some other visuals as well. I will put them in the Facebook group as well as in the show notes, and you can get those. Add what you think. Share your ideas as well. We love to hear from you. Wednesdays, we like to post something in the Facebook group where we're asking for your input, what things you're struggling with. This is a great time. Have you had great success in figuring out a good replacement behavior and how to use that within your BIP plans? So that is all we have for today.
Thanks for listening to the Misfit Behaviorists. And be sure to tune in next week for more tips and tricks. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.